What's up, everybody? Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we're going to get back to fantasy football content. We're going to be talking about the AFC East, doing a preview for the 2025 fantasy football season. This will be about a 25 to 30 minute video in which I'll go through the 4 AFC East teams, talk about how I see the value of each of the players and potential sleepers on each of the rosters too. If you're interested in more content like this, please subscribe to my channel. I make fantasy football videos as well as other content that you can check out in the description below. So we will get into the AFC East, and my breakdown for this of what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends, then also touch a little bit on defense and kicker as applicable. As you may know, I'm not a huge fan of kickers in general in fantasy football, so because of that, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on them. But we will focus on the position players and where some value is for all of these positions relative to their draft ADP. So we'll go alphabetical order, and we'll start with the Buffalo Bills. So first of all, Josh Allen, as you've known for years, is a great fantasy football quarterback. He is consistently one of the top 3 to 4 performing quarterbacks year to year for the past 5 years, and an excellent fantasy football asset. Because of that, he is the number 1 quarterback on most people's boards, and I would agree with that as well. I would put Josh Allen up there. He's very close for me with the likes of Jalen Hurts and Lamar Jackson in terms of how I see them ranking relative to each other on the season. Jalen Hurts to me has the best value relative to his ADP, but Josh Allen going in the mid to early 3rd round is still pretty good value for me in order to take him there. So it's always a trade-off with quarterbacks if you want to take them as high as you can, and the deal with Josh Allen is that if you are going to take Josh Allen, you're going to cost yourself a pretty valuable flex position that you could use as either a running back or as a wide receiver 1 on your team. So because of that, you've got to really balance your roster out and make sure that you have a plan for getting Josh Allen if you are going to cost yourself potentially one of your best running backs or one of your best wide receivers. I usually stay away from him, but still, because of just how much value Josh Allen has, it's not a bad selection to take him relative to his ADP, given his rushing ability, his explosive play ability, just one of the best quarterbacks that you could have in fantasy football. Not much really behind him. They're bringing back Mitch Trubisky again, who is pretty familiar with their system and thrives as a backup to Josh Allen. Other considerations here are the running back position. So we will move to James Cook. And James Cook, as I will talk about with the pass catchers on this team, it's pretty wide open in terms of who is going to be a reliable pass catcher. But one of the consistencies with this Buffalo Bills offense since they've transitioned to Joe Brady as their offensive coordinator is their reliance upon the running game. And because of that, James Cook, as a great pass-catching running back in addition to an explosive play running back who's a true 3-down back, in my opinion, is great value. And he's going in the early 4th. He is one of the top running backs that I'm targeting in general in fantasy football. My general strategy in fantasy football is to try to lock up your wide receiver 1s early in the 1st round, maybe even 2nd round if you can get a good wide receiver pairing, because of the volatility of running backs and how injured they can get. If you can wrap up an elite receiver, that's generally what I would try to do. I forgot to mention this earlier, but I will have more content coming out in the next couple weeks with mock drafts from Sleeper that will help kind of guide what I would do. I'll show you kind of what I would do at different draft positions relative to the Sleeper mock board, and that'll kind of change over time over the next few weeks as we get closer to draft day. But James Cook right now going in the early 4th is excellent value, one of my favorite running backs that you can get. If you do own Cook, I would recommend also getting Ray Davis as his handcuff, very explosive running back who's excelled at times this season. Had up and down performances, but if anything were to happen to Cook, Ray Davis is an excellent fantasy asset. And I think last season, more than anything, with the Christian McCaffrey injury, showed you the importance of having handcuffs. And James Cook is one of those guys that you want to make sure that you have his handcuffed. Ty Johnson is another name to consider on this roster. It was productive from time to time, but really not going to be much of a factor unless anything were to happen to Cook. Wide receivers. So they've brought in some new wide receivers this year, but none of them are really game-breaking guys that stand out. They didn't get that elite Stephon Diggs replacement yet, and they seem to be content with that. They brought in Josh Palmer from the Los Angeles Chargers. They also brought over Elijah Moore from the Browns. Laviska Shenault, who, to be honest, I didn't even know if he was still in the league. There's a chance he may not even make this roster. But they have Khalil Shakir coming back. Cleon Coleman is their high upside guy. And yeah, Curtis Samuel, it's not a very exciting receiver core. But at the same time, Khalil Shakir relative to his ADP is pretty good value. And I would honestly argue for Keon Coleman if you're looking for guys that you can put on your bench who could give you some good value. So Keon Coleman on Sleeper is generally going in the 10th round, I believe. I'm just going to double check that real quick. He is pretty good, he's going in the 8th round. That's still pretty good though. You can potentially get Josh Allen's wide receiver 1, albeit with a low floor. He's more like a wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 fringe range, but he did display consistency last year that you really liked. So if you could get that late in your mid to late rounds, like 8th to 10th round range, that's pretty good value for Khalil Shakir. Keon Coleman, on the other hand, going in the 13th round. I like that. There is a lot of upside with him. He was injured at times last year, didn't always perform, but he is a rookie and he's learning the offense. So it's possible he could get that second-year bump that we've seen with some guys throughout the years. I think that this is a good value pickup to get him in the 13th round as well. I really like him. Other than that, none of these other receivers are really on the draft board for most of the sleeper formats that I've seen. Josh Palmer is interesting, but he really was not a very consistent breakout threat for the Chargers, who honestly probably had a bigger void for a wide receiver last year than anything, but he was outperformed by Ladd McConkey and Quentin Johnson for the most part. So I don't really see him breaking out in this situation. Elijah Moore, he's a great PPR target machine if you're interested in that, but I don't really know if I rely on him either. Curtis Samuel had some games here and there. Again, not really relying on him. But what's interesting is that Mac Hollins played a big role on this team, especially late in the season, as a reliable weapon for Josh Allen. So is that going to be Keon Coleman? Is it going to be one of these other guys? That's a big storyline to monitor with this Bills team throughout the season. And it may be the tight end position, which I'll talk about next. Currently, Dawson Knox ahead of Dalton Kincaid on the depth chart. I don't really know if I agree with that. I think Dalton Kincaid is definitely a better fantasy asset moving forward. Kincaid dealt with injuries last season, had a very bad slide, and generally performed poorly relative to his ADP. Because of that, he's going much later in mocks this year. He's going all the way down around the 12th round, in which that's not a bad flyer if he lives up to his potential. And based on what I described earlier, they need somebody to be that possession receiver to make up for what they've lost with Mac Hollins. Maybe there's an argument to be made for Kincaid. Dawson Knox I don't really like unless anything were to happen to Kincaid injury-wise. In terms of the Bills' defense, I think they'll be a solid defense this year, but I'm not really projecting them to be an elite defense. I think there's a good chance they will be available in late rounds, but depending on the matchup, they will be excellent because of Sean McDermott's system. I think they could be a good defense that could become a great option down the road. And then the kicker, Tyler Bass, has been pretty good for a little while. He's going a little bit higher than I would like generally in kicker drafts, but I think if you're looking at a solid option in the last round, if you do decide to draft a kicker, you have to. I think this is a solid option that you could pick. All right, so we will go on to the Miami Dolphins. The Dolphins have a lot of controversy around their team in terms of just how they're projected to be this season. I'm a little more bullish on them than most people. I still think that they have a lot of great weapons, and I think they should be competitive, but we don't really know exactly. It seems like they're getting passed by a lot of teams here these days, and a lot of this is going to depend on Tua Tagovailoa's health. And that's where we start with. We start with him. He is generally not getting drafted right now in sleeper leagues and single quarterback formats because of his health, for one. And then two, when he did play, he was not the explosive self that we saw in years past. He was ranked as the 21st quarterback on the season, which is not really what you want to see out of a guy like that. So because of that, he's generally not getting drafted now. And I think that if you are going to play the streaming quarterback game, if you're waiting late round. This could be a very good option based on certain matchups moving forward. I'm just going to take a look at their schedule here for a sec. And they got some good matchups early on. This may be somebody to look at potentially as somebody that you could play early in the season. So while that's loading, we'll kind of get to some of these other quarterbacks. They've got Zach Wilson and Quinn Ewers, two quarterback projects that had hype at some point in time. I don't expect to see them really do anything unless Tua gets injured. Maybe in the deepest of dynasty leagues, they have some value for that reason, but not for redraft purposes. And we go here to the Dolphins. So a couple of their first round games they've got, or not first round games, still in the basketball mindset, I feel like. So in the first couple games on the season, we've got the Indianapolis Colts. That's not a great defense. So maybe, playing in a dome, that could be a good environment for Tua. Then you've got home against the New England Patriots. So he generally does very well at home early in the season. Then they get the Jets later on. They get the Carolina Panthers in week 5. So this is a pretty solid stretch for Tua that he may be valuable early in the season as somebody that's not getting drafted. We move to the running back position now. Devon Achane, who is one of the more polarizing running backs. He was generally going around the early third last year, late second round turn, and that's kind of where he is this year. So the story with him, very explosive, but seemingly very system dependent. He's very dependent on the weather being good, the offense being set up with a lot of great weapons, having Tua available, because his yards after rush are crazy, and we know how explosive he is. But he also kind of had some dud games late in the season that kind of soured some people's opinions on him. I think because of his upside, he's one of the more intriguing running backs that you can get that range. I don't really like him as much as some of the guys around him, like Bucky Irving and Josh Jacobs, for different reasons. I'll talk more about those when we get to those teams' previews. But Achane is still a solid running back that I like and I think could be extreme value for you that can be very reliable. His handcuffs are interesting. Jalen Wright and Alexander Madison are the two that stand out. They also drafted rookie Ollie Gordon. I just don't see Gordon really getting the time. But the thing with this Miami backfield is for quite a while they've been ravaged by injuries, and I wouldn't be surprised to see some of these guys be relevant from time to time. So again, if you have Achane, I would probably roster Wright first. But Madison has been productive too from time to time, including last season. And then Gordon is a wild card that you can take a flyer on if you're interested in. Wide receivers. So Tyreek Hill, down season last year. He was drafted as one of the top wide receivers and was pretty disappointing for the most part on the season. Because of that, Tyreek Hill is now going in the mid to late third, which I think is excellent value for him at his position. He is still one of the more elite players. And if you're looking at last season, maybe because of Tua's early injuries, it affected his ability to get the ball downfield, and they started dinking and dunking a lot more as the season went along. But if Mike McDaniel can figure out how to expand that offense again, Tyreek Hill could really pop this season, and getting him in the late third is great value. I cannot really feel as optimistic, though, about Jalen Waddle, because for me, he has always been a guy that has had a lot of hype because of his draft position where they took him in 2021. And he consistently ends up very high on draft boards. This season is actually one of the ones where he kind of falls into a more moderate range. I'm just trying to skim for him real quick. I saw him somewhere in the middle rounds of the draft in which he was kind of interesting, but it's not really somebody that I'm targeting and trying to get. He's here in the 7th round, kind of the 708 position on this fantasy draft that I see here. That's like an okay flyer for him, but to me, Jalen Waddle was borderline droppable for a lot of the season last year, and he's injured a lot of the other times. I would still probably not take him in the 7th round if that's where he's falling in his ADP on draft day. Very interesting player. We'll see if anything happens to Tyreek Hill. Maybe Waddle can start to get some more consistency, but I think this is kind of the last season where we need to see something out of Waddle in order for him to continue to be ranked this high in mock drafts. Interesting guys that they have that are not being drafted, but I think could be solid sleepers. The wide receiver 3 is Nick Westbrook-Akine, who had a great touchdown streak for a while last year that made him very relevant in fantasy in the mid to late part of the season around October, November timeframe. So he's coming in here, and this is a team that lost Jonnu Smith, and we saw Jonnu Smith really thrive as that possession receiver in a dinking and dunking game that this offense really kind of became as the season went along. So could Nick Westbrook-Akine fill that role that Jonnu Smith had, or could it be Darren Waller at tight end? So I'll talk about Waller a little bit more when we get to the tight end section here, but other wide receivers they have on this team are not super interesting to me. They have Malik Washington back again. D. Eskridge didn't really work out in Seattle. He's getting an opportunity here. Those guys don't really interest me too much. But Westbrook-Akine and then Waller as the tight end are two interesting options to me that I think could really fill that void that Jonnu Smith left behind. And neither of them are on draft boards and sleepers. So if you're looking at a flyer that you could take late on your bench to potentially start early on or hold for a little bit and see if they reap some value for you, those are just some sleepers for me on this Dolphins team I'm keeping an eye on. The Dolphins defense is not really worth talking about at all. They've got some talented players, but I've got to see a little bit more for me to feel confident in them. And then Jason Sanders, the kicker, not really doing it for me either. We will move now to the New England Patriots. The Patriots are an interesting team this year. They've got a couple changes from years past that make them pretty intriguing as we go into year 2 of Drake May, and that's what we'll start with him. He showed some promise last year. He was the number 21st ranked quarterback, didn't play the whole season, so it's kind of hard to judge him based on his stats, but he is going late in sleeper as a second quarterback taken right around the 13th round. I think that's a solid placement for him. I would not be going into a season relying on Drake May as my starting quarterback, but I think if you do have a spot for him on the bench, I would be interested in seeing what you get with him. Maybe if you're taking a quarterback that earlier on that has kind of a lower ceiling, like should I say a Patrick Mahomes, I think it's kind of, well, I'm going to talk about more with him, but if you watched my channel last year, I consistently talked about how Patrick Mahomes has a very low floor these days in the Chiefs offense and does not really have a very high ceiling either. So because of that, if you're looking for a quarterback that you can pair with him and see maybe if he takes off, Drake May could be an interesting option to consider for that reason. So other quarterbacks, Josh Dobbs coming in as the backup, only really valuable if anything were to happen in an injury, but I could see him potentially being relevant should an injury happen. The running back position is interesting on the Patriots because for a while they've had Ramondre Stevenson, who I have been low on, especially last year because of the lack of weapons around the team and just the lack of talent on the offense. I think Mike Vrabel will make this a better offensive scheme in which the running backs could succeed, but now he's got Travion Henderson, the rookie out of Ohio State, second-round draft pick. And Travion Henderson is a great sleeper among the running backs who could potentially take over this backfield. Do I see it that way? I think it's possible. I mean, he's going in the 8th round, which is solid for a running back that you're looking to fill your bench position. Maybe they could take off. I still like Travion Henderson more so than Ramondre Stevenson, for example. I think that Stevenson doesn't really give you much other than early down work. Travion Henderson does give you a little bit more in the receiving game that I think could be valuable for a team like this that's expected to lose a lot of games still. So Travion Henderson, to me, I think is the better running back to own of these two. I would personally not go into the season, though, expecting that Henderson is going to be an elite breakout candidate that is going to, set the world on fire. I don't really see that happening with this team. You still got Antonio Gibson there who will probably still have a role to some degree. Yeah. But still, I think if you do want to own a running back here, it would be Travion Henderson. The wide receivers. So they have lacked wide receiver talent for quite a while on this team. It's been well documented. And they bring in Stephon Diggs as well as Matt Collins, who I talked about just a little bit ago, was pretty productive with the Bills last year. Stephon Diggs, we'll start with him. He's coming off the ACL injury. Played pretty well before that with the Texans, but he's getting to the age where we don't really know what he's going to look like. He's getting drafted around the 10th round in sleeper. That's not a bad position to take a flyer on a guy who could be the wide receiver one, but he very well could be irrelevant depending on how he's recovered from this injury since then. Stephon Diggs, very talented. He has all the pedigree in the world to take this number one wide receiver position and be a reliable target for Drake May, but it may not work out that way. Mac Hollins and the third wide receiver, Demario Douglas, are not getting drafted, and I think they are almost better value for that reason. I could see a world where either one of them steps up into a reliable target for Drake May. Demario Douglas showed flashes from time to time. I was a little bit too high on him at certain points in the season, as you may remember, but I do think that he is very talented, especially as a slot guy that could get a lot of points for you in PPR. Mac Hollins, a little bit more of a possession receiver who, if he's employed correctly, could be very good as an undrafted guy that you could pick up on your team and maybe get some points for you. They have a couple guys coming back like Kendrick Bourne, Kayshon Boutte, Jalen Polk again. These guys are end of the bench guys. I think they should get on the roster, but we'll see what happens. Not expecting much from them in fantasy. We go to the tight end now for this team. Hunter Henry is fool's gold. I'm just telling you right now, he has some excellent games from time to time in which he gets a lot of volume, and then he follows it up with a complete zero. That's the book on Hunter Henry. I would personally go somewhere else. They also got Austin Hooper, who somehow manages to stay relevant in this league. And it's on the New England Patriots where they sure enough just seem to always, no matter who the coaches are, they always have tight ends, like multiple tight ends on the field that can both be relevant at different times. It's crazy how they keep like churning that out over there. This defense is intriguing because of Mike Vrabel. I think that he has potential to turn this into an underrated defense. Don't love the division that they're in order to have to play the Bills twice and the Dolphins time to time. And, I think the Jets could have some solid offense from time to time as well. But I think this is a defense that, depending on certain matchups, may be valuable to look at time to time. They have a battle going on at kicker between John Parker Romo and a guy that they drafted this year. We'll see what happens there, but not expecting those kickers to be fantasy relevant this year. And the last team in the the AFC East, my bad. The AFC East, the last team we'll look at are the New York Jets. A lot of changes with this team too. Last year we had the Aaron Rodgers, Pat McAfee circus. Now we've got Justin Fields coming in. And we've got a new culture that's being set by the new coach from the Lions. I cannot remember his name right now. This is so bad. I cannot believe I can't remember this guy's name. Aaron Glenn, that's right. Okay, so Aaron Glenn, I do like him as a coach. I think that I was really impressed by his press conference. I think that he's going to find a way to instill culture on this team. I don't see them being a winning team this year, but I do see them being competitive, and I think it won't be long until they're back to being relevant again. But this team is going to be interesting for fantasy because you've got Justin Fields as a quarterback with a lot of flaws. He's a fantasy darling for a lot of reasons, and he's going at the end of drafts, right around the 13th round. He's a great flyer. I mentioned if you have a guy like Mahomes who doesn't have a high ceiling that you may get earlier, Fields is somebody that you could take a flyer on late as a second quarterback and see what happens. I think that he could have a lot of great rushing games that make him good from time to time. I'm still not convinced that this guy can read the field as a starting level quarterback. The Jets will give him the opportunity, though, and see what happens from there. He's got Tyrod Taylor as his backup. Hopefully he can kind of mentor him in that department. Running backs. So Breece Hall was one of the top drafted running backs last year and pretty much disappointed on the season this year. So because of that, he's now fallen into the 4th round. And I think that is a good range to get Breece Hall. I don't like him as much as some of the guys who are getting potentially like Alvin Kamara in that same range or Kyron Williams. But at the same time, I think that Breece Hall is still a good running back that you can get in the 4th round. My concerns, though, is that, last year he had Aaron Rodgers, who was not a running quarterback. Now you've got Justin Fields, who is a running quarterback. So what is that going to look like? Is Fields going to be taking some of these touches away from Breece Hall? You've also got Braylon Allen, who was already in a kind of a timeshare with Breece Hall anyway. Aaron Glenn coming from the Lions, we've kind of seen them employ a multiple running back approach with Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. I know this is an offense versus a defensive coach situation, but maybe they try to do the same thing still. That's something to consider. So because of that, I've got a little more questions about Breece Hall and some of those other guys in his range. The wide receivers, Garrett Wilson just got locked into a big contract. I think that he's going to be one of the better wide receivers that you can have in fantasy. His range, I believe, is going relatively high. He's going in the late 3rd round. That's pretty solid value for him. My concern, though, is he does have Justin Fields throwing him the ball. So I do think that, he's an interesting wide receiver to me there, but not one of the ones that I really like compared to some other guys that you can get in that range, like Terry McLaurin, for example, assuming that that contract gets resolved, and Chase Brown, who's a solid running back to consider there too. The other wide receivers here, this is an argument for Garrett Wilson, is there's really not much behind him. There's Josh Reynolds, who has been successful with the Lions, brought over kind of for that reason. Alan Lazard, a Rodgers favorite, who somehow has survived the purge and is still getting a paycheck from the Jets. I don't know how well this season is going to go for him, though. He's kind of on the decline. And rookie Arian Smith from Georgia is a low-risk consideration here who is not getting drafted, but may step into this wide receiver 2 role. So this is another sleeper that I like as somebody that you can take advantage of in the deep formats. Arian Smith may be a guy that can step in as the number 2 wide receiver on this team. So we'll see how that goes for him. A lot of opportunity to step in because this team really does need a second wide receiver after Garrett Wilson. Tight end. So they took the rookie Mason Taylor, who I believe is the son of Jason Taylor. I want to say that's correct. The former defensive end for the Miami Dolphins. So, you like that in terms of a guy that has familiarity with the NFL. And he's a pretty good tight end prospect, but he was not getting the recognition. Yeah, he is the son of Jason Taylor. I just saw that here on my notes. So this guy, he's a solid tight end prospect, not as much as the Tyler Warrens or the Colson Lovelands that were taken in the 1st round this year. But he's stepping into a void where they need a number 1 tight end. They did not bring back Tyler Conklin. So because of that, this is a interesting option to consider. But they do have some other guys as well in there, like Jeremy Ruckert, Stone Smart, who have shown production from time to time. So I would not be surprised if this ends up as a kind of a rotisserie where you don't really know who is going to be the elite tight end option if there is one. But in theory, if Justin Fields can rely on his tight end as a mid-area target, this could be a solid pickup to look at Mason Taylor. He's generally going undrafted, if not in the late rounds, at the tight end position. And if you don't get one of those early ones that are elite, this could be a solid pivot option. The Jets defense has taken a step back from its heyday years back 2 or 3 years ago. They still got some solid players like Sauce Gardner, Quinnen Williams, etc. that can make this team interesting, and I think Aaron Glenn will bring some of that to this team as well. So I like that. Not sure they're going to be drafted, though, but this is a team to keep an eye on in streaming matchups. Their kicker, Caden Davis, right now is not somebody that interests me in fantasy either. All right, so that's all we've got for this video. We will be continuing to go through the divisions and preparing for the fantasy football season. Like I said, we'll also have some mock drafts looking at Sleeper as well. So if you're interested in that, please subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you guys next time. Have a good one. Bye.